Dr. Adrian Cole stumbled through dense jungle vegetation on Verath IV, completely lost and increasingly certain that accepting this solo xenobotany research assignment had been one of his worst professional decisions. The jungle looked identical in every direction: towering trees with bioluminescent bark that pulsed with soft blue light, massive ferns that rustled with the movement of creatures he couldn't identify, and vines that seemed to deliberately tangle his path every few meters. His comm unit was showing no signal. His GPS locator was providing coordinates that suggested either equipment malfunction or he'd somehow traveled through a spatial anomaly, and his water supply was getting concerningly low. His xenobotany training was excellent. His fieldwork experience was extensive. His wilderness survival skills were adequate. His sense of direction was apparently non-existent. Adrian had been tracking a rare flowering vine species for 3 hours, so focused on documenting specimens and collecting samples that he'd stopped paying adequate attention to navigation markers. The vine was fascinating. It showed adaptive properties that could have significant pharmaceutical applications, and his research station would be thrilled with the data he was gathering. But his research station was also approximately 15 kilometers in some direction he could no longer confidently identify. And the sun was setting, and Adrian was becoming acutely aware that spending the night alone in an alien jungle was both dangerous and professionally embarrassing. He was considering whether to establish a temporary camp and wait for the research station to notice his absence when he pushed through a particularly dense section of undergrowth and emerged directly into what appeared to be some kind of ceremonial gathering. Adrian froze, his brain taking several seconds to process what he was seeing. Approximately 50 Verath warriors, the indigenous population he'd been explicitly told to avoid disturbing, were arranged in a large circle in a cleared area, watching as individuals competed in what looked like a complex obstacle course combined with combat trials. The Verath were an impressive species by any standard. They averaged 7 to 8 feet in height, their frames built for power and speed, with musculature that made human bodybuilders look like they'd skipped every gym day. Their distinctive long ears moved independently to track sounds, swiveling with impressive precision to follow activity around them. Their society was organized around tribal hunting traditions, with complex social structures that Adrian's briefing materials had only covered superficially. What he knew for certain was that he should absolutely not be interrupting what was clearly an important ritual, and he needed to back away quietly before anyone noticed his accidental intrusion. He took one careful step backward, then another, trying to retreat into the jungle before his presence caused some kind of diplomatic incident that would get his research permit revoked. That was when a Verath elder standing at the edge of the ceremonial circle turned and spotted him. The elder called out in their language, his voice carrying clearly despite not seeming to raise his volume. Adrian's translator earpiece, which he'd remembered to charge despite forgetting basic navigation principles, kicked in with a slight delay that rendered the words in his native tongue. The outsider wishes to participate in the claiming trial. Before Adrian could explain that he absolutely did not wish to participate in anything and was just very lost, and would be happy to leave immediately and never speak of this again, another elder responded with what sounded like formal pronouncement. His translator rendered it with helpful clarity. He stands in challenge space during the ritual hour. By ancient law, he has declared intent to compete for mate claiming. Let the trial proceed. Adrian's mouth opened to clarify the enormous misunderstanding, to explain that he was a botanist studying plant species, and definitely not declaring intent to compete for anything involving the word mate claiming. But before he could form a coherent sentence, events overtook his attempt at diplomatic explanation. A Verath warrior stepped into the center of the circle, apparently expecting to face Adrian in whatever trial this was. The warrior looked confident, experienced, and like he could break Adrian in half without significant effort. His bearing suggested someone who'd done this before and expected no particular challenge from the small human who'd somehow wandered into challenge space. Adrian, whose combat experience consisted entirely of one self-defense class in graduate school that he'd barely passed, because the instructor took pity on his complete lack of physical coordination, was desperately trying to communicate that this was a huge mistake that would end badly for everyone, especially him. He held up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of, "Wait, let me explain." But the elders were already making formal pronouncements, and the gathered warriors were watching with expressions that ranged from curious to amused. The trial began with the sound of what might have been a ceremonial drum or possibly a signal horn. Adrian's cultural knowledge was insufficient to identify it accurately. The Varath warrior immediately started moving through the obstacle course with practiced efficiency, demonstrating raw power and traditional hunting techniques that were clearly the expected approach. Adrian stood frozen for approximately 3 seconds, his brain trying to process what was happening, before his survival instincts kicked in with urgent suggestions that he should probably start moving, or he was going to fail spectacularly in front of 50 judging aliens. The obstacle course wasn't actually direct combat, which was the only reason Adrian survived the first 2 minutes. It was a complex arrangement testing speed, agility, tracking ability, and strategic thinking, apparently qualities the Varath valued in their warriors. The course involved climbing sections with handholds designed for Varath proportions, balance challenges over gaps that looked terrifying, tracking elements where competitors had to identify specific markers, and strategic puzzles that required choosing correct paths through multiple options. The Varath warrior was clearly superior in strength, traditional hunting skills, and actually understanding what the trial was supposed to test. But Adrian, motivated by sheer panic and a desperate desire not to die embarrassingly in an alien jungle, managed to keep moving through frantic improvisation. Where the warrior used raw power to climb, Adrian used leverage principles learned from moving heavy research equipment. Where the warrior relied on traditional tracking techniques, Adrian employed observation methods derived from years of identifying plant species in challenging terrain. It wasn't pretty. It definitely wasn't impressive by Varath standards. His technique was completely wrong according to their traditions. But somehow, through combination of panic, creativity, and dumb luck that Adrian would later attribute to divine intervention or possibly a sympathetic universe taking pity on complete idiots, he completed the trial course without dying or injuring himself permanently. The Varath gathering erupted in surprised discussion, conversations overlapping in their language faster than his translator could render accurately. Adrian caught fragments, unusual methods, clever adaptations. The ancestors have peculiar sense of humor. He moves like prey animal but somehow succeeds, and none of it sounded particularly complimentary, but at least no one seemed actively angry about his performance. The warriors who'd been watching were exchanging looks that suggested they weren't quite sure what to make of what they'd just witnessed. Several were laughing, though whether at him or with appreciation for the absurdity was unclear. Others looked thoughtful, as if trying to understand how someone so obviously unsuited for their trials had managed to complete the course. The elders conferred in rapid discussion, while Adrian stood there trying to catch his breath, process what had just happened, and figure out whether he could now politely excuse himself and return to his research station to file a report about this catastrophic diplomatic incident. Then the elders made their formal proclamation, and Adrian's confusion turned to immediate horror as his translator helpfully rendered the ceremonial language with perfect clarity. The outsider has completed the claiming trial through unconventional means that demonstrate intelligence and adaptability. The ancestors have spoken through his success, despite his obvious physical limitations and complete ignorance of our traditions. He is hereby declared mate claimed for the tribe's finest huntress, Curathane the Swift. Let the sacred bond be recognized and celebrated according to our most ancient traditions. So it is spoken, so it shall be. Adrian's brain, which was still operating at diminished capacity due to oxygen debt and adrenaline crash, needed several seconds to parse what he just heard. Mate claimed, huntress, bond, sacred traditions. These were words that his linguistic training and basic pattern recognition suggested had very specific cultural meanings, none of which involved him being able to politely excuse himself and forget this entire situation ever happened. His translator was providing helpful contextual definitions in a text overlay that made everything worse. Mate claimed meant permanently bonded through sacred ritual. Huntress referred to a warrior class of significant status. And the phrase, so it shall be, apparently indicated an irrevocable pronouncement that couldn't be questioned without giving grave offense. Before he could protest, explain, or articulate any of the 1,000 objections forming in his panicking mind, a Verath woman stepped forward from the gathered crowd, and Adrian's ability to form coherent thoughts temporarily short-circuited completely. Curathane was exactly as impressive as her title suggested, tall even by Verath standards, moving with the kind of predatory grace that made every step look effortlessly powerful, her bearing suggesting someone who'd never lost a hunt or a fight in her entire life. Her distinctive long ears were decorated with hunting trophies that his translator helpfully identified as markers of significant achievements in tracking, combat, and leadership. Her eyes locked onto Adrian with an intensity that made him want to hide behind something large and solid, or possibly teleport to another planet entirely. She was looking at him the way a predator evaluates interesting prey, not hostile exactly, but with focused attention that suggested she was assessing every detail and finding the situation fascinating in ways that made Adrian's survival instincts scream warnings about being noticed by apex predators. Then she smiled, a wide, pleased expression that managed to be both genuinely beautiful and slightly terrifying in its confidence, and spoke in Verath that his translator rendered with helpful and horrifying clarity. Human. You have been given a mate through sacred trial and ancestral selection, and he is mine. I am Curathane, and I claim you with pride and satisfaction. The ancestors have chosen well, even if neither of us understands their wisdom yet. But we will learn together, as is proper for mate-bonded pairs. You belong to me now, small human. This is great honor and sacred responsibility. I accept both gladly. The possessive tone in her voice suggested she was quite satisfied with this arrangement, as if fate had just delivered exactly what she'd been waiting for. Several warriors in the crowd made sounds that might have been congratulations or possibly suppressed laughter. Adrian's cultural knowledge was insufficient to tell the difference. Adrian's brain, still trying to process the whole, completed a trial I didn't understand thing, could only manage to articulate a response that was both accurate and completely inadequate to the situation. I think there's been a misunderstanding, a very large misunderstanding, possibly the largest misunderstanding in the history of human-alien first contact scenarios. Curathane's smile widened, showing teeth that reminded Adrian that the Verath were evolved from apex predators. No misunderstanding, little human. You completed the claiming trial. You stood in challenge space during ritual hour, participated in sacred competition, and succeeded through methods our warriors have never used. The ancestors guided you here for purpose we do not question. You are mate-claimed according to our most ancient laws. Mine, specifically, as the finest huntress of our tribe. This is simply reality now. You will learn to accept it, as all must accept the will of ancestors and the bonds they create through sacred trial. She moved closer with those same predatory steps, closing the distance between them until Adrian had to tilt his head back significantly to maintain eye contact. He was acutely aware of the height difference, the strength difference, and the fact that she could probably carry him away over her shoulder if she decided his cooperation was optional. I should explain, he tried again, his voice coming out higher and less confident than he'd prefer. I'm a xenobotanist. I was studying plant species. I got lost in the jungle and accidentally stumbled into your ritual. I didn't know what I was participating in. I'm not a warrior. I'm not qualified to be anyone's mate. This is all a catastrophic accident caused by my terrible sense of direction and extremely bad timing. And yet you participated, Curathane said with that same amused certainty that suggested she found his confusion endearing rather than problematic. And yet you succeeded where many of our own warriors have failed. The ancestors do not operate through accident, small human. If you were guided to our trial at this moment, it was because you were meant to be here. Fate does not make mistakes. To suggest otherwise is to question wisdom older than your entire species' recorded history. She reached out and touched his shoulder with a hand that was large enough to completely encompass it, a possessive gesture that suggested she'd already mentally filed him under mine, and was quite satisfied with the acquisition. I am Curathane, finest huntress of the Swift Wind tribe, undefeated in trials for 8 seasons, chosen by the ancestors to bond with you through sacred mate claiming. You will come to our village, learn our ways as I teach you, and we will begin the bonding customs as tradition requires. This is not request or negotiation. This is simply what will happen now, because the ancestors have spoken, and their will cannot be questioned or refused. The absolute certainty in her voice suggested that arguing would be like arguing with gravity or the passage of time, theoretically possible but practically useless. Adrian looked around desperately for support, for someone who might understand that this was an enormous misunderstanding that needed to be resolved through diplomatic channels rather than sacred bonding rituals. But the assembled Varath were all nodding in agreement with Curathane's pronouncement, their expressions suggesting they found the situation perfectly reasonable even if the human involved was obviously confused and possibly in shock. One elder stepped forward, speaking in formal tones that Adrian's translator rendered with ceremonial gravity. The bond is recognized by ancient law and ancestral wisdom. Curathane, you will guide your mate claimed in learning our customs and traditions. He has 7 cycles of the moon to demonstrate worthy understanding and proper adaptation to our ways, after which the final bonding ceremonies will occur to seal the sacred partnership permanently. The ancestors have chosen, so it is spoken, so it shall be fulfilled. 7 lunar cycles. Adrian's panicking brain did quick math and realized that was approximately 6 standard months. 6 months to somehow learn an entire alien culture's worth of customs and traditions, or presumably face some kind of permanent consequences, involving being bonded to an alien huntress, who could probably bench press his entire body weight. This was definitely the worst professional assignment of his career, possibly the worst professional assignment of any human's career. His research supervisor was going to have so many questions. Adrian tried several more times to explain the situation, to clarify the misunderstanding, to negotiate some kind of resolution that didn't involve him being accidentally married through a ritual he hadn't understood and definitely hadn't intended to participate in. The elders listened with polite patience and then explained, with the kind of careful simplicity usually reserved for teaching basic concepts to children, that the claiming trial was sacred, that standing in challenge space during ritual hour was an irrevocable declaration of intent, that completing the trial meant the ancestors had approved his presence and purpose, and that questioning any of these facts was both impossible and disrespectful to traditions that had guided their people for millennia. "But I don't speak your language fluently," Adrian protested, grasping at any argument that might make them reconsider. "I don't understand your customs. I'm not Varath. I'm human. We have completely different cultural practices, social structures, biological needs. This can't possibly work based on fundamental compatibility issues that go beyond simple tradition." Then I will teach you our language, our customs, our ways, Curathane said, with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered a problem she couldn't solve through determination and skill. You will learn to be a proper mate. It is my responsibility now to guide you, to protect you, to ensure you understand what it means to be claimed by Verath tradition and bonded to their finest huntress. I do not fail at tasks I undertake. You will learn. We will adapt together. The ancestors would not have chosen you if adaptation were impossible. There was something in her tone that suggested she was actually looking forward to this responsibility, as if teaching a confused human how to be a proper Verath mate was an interesting challenge rather than an impossible burden. Adrian spent the walk back to the Verath village in a state of stunned confusion, his mind cycling between denial, panic, and a strange sort of resigned curiosity about what exactly he'd gotten himself into. Curathane walked beside him the entire way, her hand occasionally touching his arm or shoulder in gestures that seemed possessive and protective simultaneously. She pointed out various jungle features with commentary that his translator rendered, dangerous plants to avoid, useful landmarks for navigation, creatures that were safe versus those that required caution. And Adrian found himself listening despite his shock, because the information was genuinely useful, and her teaching style was surprisingly effective. Other Verath from the trial gathering followed along, clearly finding the situation entertaining. Adrian's translator caught fragments of their conversations. Curathane finally mate-claimed after rejecting so many warriors. The little human looks terrified but trying to hide it. The ancestors must have excellent sense of humor to match our fiercest huntress with such an obviously unsuitable specimen. This will be very entertaining to observe over the coming moons. The village itself was actually quite impressive when they reached it. Traditional architecture that seemed to grow organically from the jungle environment rather than being imposed upon it. Structures built from materials that blended beautifully with the surrounding vegetation. Everything arranged with both practical efficiency and aesthetic consideration. The Verath clearly had sophisticated understanding of sustainable architecture and environmental integration that Adrian's academic training made him appreciate even through his shock. Curathane guided Adrian toward a dwelling that was notably larger than most others and decorated with hunting trophies that his translator helpfully identified as markers of exceptional achievement. There were carved markers indicating successful hunts of particularly dangerous prey, woven decorations showing mastery of various weapon types, and ceremonial items that apparently denoted her status as the tribe's finest huntress. "You will stay here," she announced, and it wasn't phrased as a question or suggestion but as simple statement of fact. "Mate-claimed pairs share dwellings according to our customs. This is my home. It is now our home. You will sleep here, eat here, learn here. I will teach you our ways with patience and thoroughness, and you will learn to be a worthy partner. The bonding rituals begin tomorrow at dawn with first light. You should rest tonight. Tomorrow will be challenging for you. Bonding rituals." Adrian's voice came out higher than he'd intended, making him sound even more uncertain than he felt. "What exactly do those involve? Because I feel like I should understand what I'm agreeing to before we start anything involving the word bonding and sacred traditions." "Many things," Curathane said, with that same amused smile that suggested she found his nervousness endearing rather than concerning. "Sharing meals that we prepare together, learning to move in coordination during hunts and training exercises, understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses so we can fight better together when necessary, building the trust that allows proper partnership between mates. Some customs are more private between bonded pairs, intimate practices that strengthen connection, but those come later after initial bonding is well established and both partners are ready for deeper union. You need not fear those aspects yet, small human. We progress at pace that allows proper learning." She moved closer, and Adrian was once again acutely aware of the significant height difference, and the fact that she could probably lift him with one hand if she wanted to. Her presence was overwhelming in ways that had nothing to do with physical intimidation and everything to do with sheer force of personality and confidence. "You seem frightened, little one. There is no need for such fear. I am an excellent huntress and a skilled teacher. I have never failed at anything I set my mind to accomplish. I will ensure you understand what it means to be mine, to be part of our tribe, to honor the bond the ancestors have created between us. You will learn, and you will adapt, and you will become worthy mate even if you cannot imagine it now. This I promise you." Adrian wanted to argue, to explain that promises couldn't overcome fundamental incompatibilities, or the fact that this entire situation was built on a catastrophic misunderstanding. But the absolute certainty in her voice and the genuine confidence in her expression made the words die in his throat. She actually believed the ancestors had chosen correctly, that this would work, that teaching him would be successful. And there was something almost reassuring about her confidence, even if Adrian couldn't share it. "I'm a botanist," he said weakly, as if this somehow explained why this situation was impossible. "I study plant species and write research papers. I don't know anything about hunting or fighting or bonding rituals or being anyone's mate. My entire professional training is about observing and documenting, not participating in warrior cultures I don't understand. This can't possibly work based on fundamental differences in our skills, backgrounds, and expectations." "Then I will teach you," Kurathain said with that same absolute confidence. "You have 7 lunar cycles to learn what you need to learn. That is generous time according to our traditions. Many mate-claimed pairs have far less teaching period, especially when both partners are Verath and already understand our ways. But the elders recognized you need more guidance given your complete ignorance of everything important. I will provide that guidance with patience and thoroughness. You will learn our language beyond your translation device. You will learn to move as we move, to hunt as we hunt, to think as we think about partnership and duty and honor. And you will learn to be mine in all the ways that matter." The possessive tone she used when saying "mine" carried such certainty that Adrian felt simultaneously terrified, and oddly, slightly flattered in a way he didn't want to examine too closely. There was something compelling about being claimed with such complete confidence, even if the circumstances were catastrophic. Kurathain showed him where he would sleep, a raised platform with surprisingly comfortable bedding materials that smelled of unfamiliar but not unpleasant herbs, and provided him with water and food that she explained were appropriate for human digestive systems. She'd apparently already consulted with tribal knowledge keepers about human biological needs, which suggested a level of preparation and care that Adrian hadn't expected. "Rest tonight," she instructed, her tone gentling slightly. "You are exhausted from the trial and the shock of unexpected bonding. Tomorrow we begin training at dawn with first light. I will start with basic coordination exercises and fundamental hunting techniques. You will learn quickly or you will struggle, but either way, you will learn. I do not accept failure from myself or from those who belong to me. Sleep now, little human. Tomorrow begins your transformation from lost researcher to worthy mate." She left him alone for the night, closing the dwelling's entrance with a woven covering that provided privacy while allowing air circulation. Adrian sat on the sleeping platform, trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of approximately 6 hours, he'd gone from lost botanist to accidentally mate-claimed to an alien huntress through a ritual he hadn't understood and definitely hadn't intended to participate in. His entire life trajectory had been altered by a combination of poor navigation skills, catastrophically bad timing, and what the Verath insisted was ancestral wisdom, guiding him to exactly where he needed to be. He should be panicking more than he was. Actually, he probably was panicking, just very quietly and internally in ways that wouldn't disturb his new mate who could probably hear him through the dwelling walls with those impressive ears. But somewhere beneath the panic and shock, Adrian's scientific training was observing with detached fascination that Verath culture operated on fundamentally different assumptions about fate, choice, and partnership than human societies did. To them, questioning the ritual outcome wasn't just impractical, it was philosophically incomprehensible. The ancestors had chosen through sacred trial. The bond existed as objective fact. Learning to work within that reality was the only sensible response to circumstances they viewed as divinely ordained rather than accidentally created. Whether Adrian's more skeptical human sensibilities would adapt to those assumptions remained to be seen. Buzzed with an incoming message from the research station, undoubtedly wondering why he hadn't checked in at his scheduled time. Adrian looked at the message notification and realized he had absolutely no idea how to explain his current situation in a report that wouldn't get him recalled for psychiatric evaluation. Sorry for the delayed check-in. Got lost in the jungle, accidentally participated in a sacred mating ritual, and am now bonded to an alien huntress who insists the ancestors chose me specifically. Will provide more detailed report once I figure out what's happening. Please advise on proper protocols for this situation, as my training did not cover accidentally getting married through cultural misunderstanding. He didn't send the message. Instead, he turned off the comm unit entirely, because explaining this situation to his supervisors felt even more impossible than actually living through it. Tomorrow, he would figure out communication. Tonight, he would try to sleep in an alien dwelling, bonded to an alien mate through a ritual he didn't understand, facing 7 lunar cycles of intensive cultural education that would either transform him into a worthy partner or prove that some misunderstandings were too catastrophic to overcome. Adrian lay down on the surprisingly comfortable sleeping platform, closed his eyes, and tried to convince himself that this was all some kind of stress-induced hallucination caused by dehydration and getting lost in an alien jungle. But the reality of his situation kept intruding, the unfamiliar sounds of the village settling for night, the scent of herbs in the bedding, the memory of Curathane's possessive confidence when she claimed him as hers. This was real. He was mate-claimed. The bonding rituals began at dawn, and somewhere in this catastrophic accident, Adrian was going to have to find a way to adapt, learn, and survive what the Verath insisted was ancestral wisdom, but felt an awful lot like the universe's idea of a practical joke at his expense. He eventually fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, his dreams filled with jungle obstacles, predatory huntresses, and the terrifying certainty in Curathane's voice when she'd promised to teach him everything he needed to learn. Tomorrow would tell whether that promise was reassuring or threatening, possibly both. Dawn came far too early, announced by sounds of the village waking around him and the distinct sensation of someone watching him sleep. Adrian opened his eyes to find Curathane standing beside his sleeping platform, already dressed in training attire and looking far too alert and energetic for someone who presumably had slept at some point during the night. "You sleep deeply, little human," she observed, and there was something almost affectionate in her tone despite the early hour. "This is good. You will need your rest to be well maintained as we begin your training. Come." We start with morning exercises that all Verath perform to maintain readiness. You will learn to move as we move, to coordinate your body as we coordinate ours. This is first step in building partnership that allows proper mate bonding. Adrian wanted to protest that it was barely dawn, that he'd had maybe 5 hours of deeply troubled sleep, that his body was still sore from yesterday's accidental trial completion. But Curathane was already moving toward the dwelling entrance with clear expectation that he would follow, and arguing seemed both pointless and likely to make him look even more pathetic than he already felt. The morning exercises that Curathane called basic coordination training would have killed most humans within the first 15 minutes. They involved a complex series of movements designed to build strength, flexibility, and the kind of fluid coordination that Verath warriors apparently maintained through daily practice from childhood. Curethane demonstrated each movement with effortless grace, her body flowing through positions that looked both beautiful and impossibly difficult. "Watch carefully," she instructed, moving through a sequence that involved balance, strength, and flexibility in equal measure. This builds the coordination that allows hunting partners to move together, to anticipate each other's movements, to function as single unit rather than two separate individuals. If we cannot synchronize our bodies in simple exercises, we cannot synchronize in hunts or battles where coordination means survival. "Now you try. Copy my movements exactly." Adrian attempted to mimic her and immediately discovered that his human body was not designed for whatever she was doing. His balance was terrible. His flexibility was inadequate. His strength failed on movements that she made look effortless. Within minutes, he was breathing hard and sweating profusely, while Curethane watched with an expression that managed to combine patience with obvious assessment of exactly how much work she had ahead of her. "Your balance is terrible," she observed, which Adrian felt was unnecessarily blunt even if it was accurate. "You move like prey animal fleeing predator, all panic and reaction, no purpose or control. Your core strength is insufficient. Your flexibility is poor, your coordination is." She paused, apparently searching for a diplomatic way to say completely absent. "Developing," she finished. "We will work on all of these things. Watch again, like this." She demonstrated another sequence, her movements precise and controlled. Adrian watched with the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for identifying rare plant species, trying to understand the biomechanics of what she was doing. His scientific training suggested that Verath muscle structure and skeletal configuration were optimized for exactly these kinds of movements in ways that human anatomy simply wasn't. But saying, "I'm biomechanically unsuited for your exercises," seemed like the kind of excuse that Curethane would dismiss with the same patience she'd shown when he tried to explain the bonding was a misunderstanding. He attempted the movement again, adjusted his posture based on her demonstration, and managed to not fall over this time, which felt like significant achievement even if Curethane's expression suggested she had much higher standards for success. "Better," she said eventually, after what felt like hours but was probably only 90 minutes of grueling exercise. "Still terrible by our standards, but better than when you started. You learn quickly when properly motivated by not wanting to look completely incompetent before your mate. This is good quality. Pride can drive improvement when properly channeled." She moved closer, reaching out to adjust his posture with hands-on guidance that was completely professional, and yet intensely intimate in ways that made Adrian acutely aware of her touch. Her hands were large and strong, capable of gentleness despite obvious power, and she moved him into correct positions with the kind of practiced ease that suggested she'd taught many students before. Core tighter, shoulders back. Balance centered. Yes, like that. Hold the position. Breathe steadily. This is how proper form feels, little one. Your body will remember through repetition even if your mind doubts. We will practice these movements every dawn until they become instinct rather than effort. The training continued with Curethane providing running commentary on everything Adrian was doing wrong, which was essentially everything, but also occasional praise when he managed to execute something correctly, which happened rarely enough to feel genuinely rewarding when it occurred. She was simultaneously the most demanding teacher he'd ever encountered and the most patient with his obvious limitations, a combination that confused him until he realized she was treating this exactly like she'd treat training any student. High standards with realistic assessment of starting capabilities. After the morning exercises, she led him to a communal eating area where other Verath were gathering for morning meal. The area was an open pavilion with seating arrangements that seemed organized by family groups and social relationships. Several warriors who were apparently friends or colleagues of Curethane's, approached with expressions that ranged from amused to genuinely curious about the human she'd been bonded to. They spoke in rapid Verath that Adrian's translator struggled to follow, but he caught the general meaning. They were congratulating Curethane on her mate claim, while expressing varying degrees of surprise that she'd been matched with an outsider who clearly knew nothing about their ways and looked like a strong wind could knock him over. "This is Adrian," Curethane announced with possessive pride that made it very clear she considered him her responsibility and property in equal measure. "My mate claimed human. The ancestors brought him to our trial through mysterious means that we do not question, and he completed the challenge through intelligence and adaptability rather than raw strength. He is small and weak by our standards, knows nothing of our customs, cannot speak our language beyond his translation device, and moves with coordination of injured prey animal. But he will learn. I will ensure it. He belongs to me now, and I do not accept failure from those who belong to me." The way she introduced him, simultaneously claiming ownership while defending his presence and outlining all his inadequacies, made Adrian feel like an interesting project she'd undertaken rather than an actual partner. But there was also something protective in her tone, a clear message to the other warriors that, while she acknowledged his limitations, she expected them to respect the bond the ancestors had created and not mock what she was working to improve. The other Verath responded with polite acknowledgement, though several couldn't suppress amused smiles at his obvious discomfort with being discussed as if he weren't present. One particularly large warrior, someone who clearly held significant status based on how others deferred to him, addressed Adrian directly in heavily accented but understandable Terran standard. "You are fortunate beyond measure, human. Curethane is finest huntress our tribe has produced in 3 generations. Many warriors from our tribe and neighboring tribes have attempted to claim her through trials. All have failed to meet her standards or impressed her sufficiently to accept bonding. That she accepts you, outsider who knows nothing of our ways, is remarkable. The ancestors clearly saw something in you that our warriors lacked. Do not dishonor her choice or the wisdom that guided you to our ritual. Learn well, adapt completely, become worthy of the bond she has accepted." "I'm trying not to dishonor anyone," Adrian managed, which was the most diplomatic response he could formulate given his exhaustion and continued confusion about this entire situation. "Though I'm still not entirely sure how I ended up mate claimed through a ritual I didn't understand and definitely didn't intend to participate in." "The ancestors guided you," the warrior said as if this explained everything and rendered all questions irrelevant. "They work in ways mortals do not always understand immediately. Your presence at the trial was fate, not accident. The sooner you accept this truth, the easier your path will become. Fighting against fate is exhausting and pointless. Learning to work with it is wisdom." The days that followed established a routine that Adrian found simultaneously exhausting, overwhelming, and oddly engaging despite his continued belief that this entire situation was catastrophic. Curethane approached teaching him Verath customs with the same focused intensity she apparently applied to all challenges in her life. Dawn training sessions built his physical coordination and stamina through exercises that left him sore and exhausted but undeniably improving. Midday lessons taught him hunting techniques, weapon handling, tracking skills, and the complex social customs that governed Verath tribal life. Evening meals, which mate-claimed pairs apparently shared privately according to tradition, provided opportunities for quieter conversation where Curethane asked about human culture with genuine curiosity. "Humans do not have mate-claiming rituals guided by ancestors," she asked one evening, sounding genuinely incredulous that any intelligent species would organize partnerships differently than the Verath did. "We have marriages," Adrian explained, grateful for a topic he actually understood. "But they're based on mutual choice developed over time, not ritual trials and ancestral selection. People court each other, develop romantic feelings, decide together whether to formalize the relationship through various legal and social structures. It's much more gradual and consensual in nature. Consensual, Curathane repeated the word thoughtfully, as if testing its meaning. You mean both parties choose freely based on personal preference. Interesting concept. Among Verath, the ancestors choose through sacred trials because mortals are poor judges of compatibility when left to their own devices. We think we know what we want, but the ancestors see deeper. They match souls that will strengthen each other, complement each other's weaknesses, build partnerships that last beyond individual desires or shallow attractions. She leaned forward slightly, her intense gaze fixed on Adrian. Does your human way work? Do your marriages endure? Do partners truly complement each other in meaningful ways, or do they choose based on shallow attractions that fade when circumstances become difficult? Sometimes they work beautifully, Adrian admitted honestly. Sometimes they fail spectacularly, but we value the choice itself, the agency to decide our own paths rather than having them chosen by external forces we don't control. And yet you are here, Curathane observed with that same thoughtful expression. Chosen by forces you did not control, in a bond you did not seek, learning to be part of partnership you never requested. And despite your resistance and confusion, you are adapting and learning and becoming stronger. Perhaps your human way of choosing is not the only valid approach to partnership. Perhaps there is wisdom in trusting forces greater than individual preference. Adrian didn't have a good counterargument to that. He was adapting despite his initial resistance. The training was brutal but effective. His coordination was improving measurably. His understanding of Verath customs was deepening daily. And more concerningly, he was beginning to see Curathane as more than just the overwhelming force who'd claimed him. She was an excellent teacher, patient with his limitations while demanding genuine effort, and capable of surprising gentleness when explaining difficult concepts or correcting his mistakes. He was starting to notice things about her that had nothing to do with her role as his teacher, and everything to do with her as a person. The way she moved with unconscious grace even during mundane activities. The intelligence in her eyes when she explained complex hunting strategies. The unexpected humor in her commentary when other villagers did something amusing. The fierce protectiveness she showed when other warriors questioned whether a human could ever be worthy of bonding with their finest huntress. Weeks passed in this routine of training, learning, and gradual adaptation. Adrian's physical capabilities improved enough that he could keep up with basic group activities without embarrassing himself completely. His language skills developed to the point where he could conduct simple conversations without constant translator dependence. His understanding of Verath's social customs deepened enough that he could navigate village interactions without constant guidance from Curathane. And somewhere in the daily routine of dawn exercises, shared meals, patient teaching, and building familiarity, Adrian realized he'd stopped thinking constantly about escape and started thinking about what it would actually mean to stay, to commit, to build a life in this place with this person who'd claimed him so possessively and was teaching him so patiently. The realization hit him during a group hunt where Curathane had included him as part of her hunting party. He wasn't expected to take down prey. That would be beyond his capabilities for years, yet according to her assessment. But he was assigned support roles, tracking unusual movement patterns that his botanical observation training helped him notice, spotting potential dangers that others might miss, maintaining awareness of the group's position relative to village location. These were roles that played to his actual strengths rather than trying to force him into being something he wasn't. When the hunt succeeded in bringing down a large prey animal that would feed multiple families, Curathane praised his contributions publicly in front of the other hunters. Adrian tracked the prey's alternate path when our traditional routes failed to locate it, she told the group, her voice carrying pride that made something warm unfold in Adrian's chest. His observation skills are different from ours, but valuable for exactly that reason. He thinks in ways we do not because his training is different, and that makes him useful to hunting parties in roles we had not previously considered important. The ancestors chose him for reasons we are beginning to understand. Do not discount his worth simply because it manifests differently than our traditions expect. Back in their dwelling that evening, Adrian found himself speaking before his brain could prevent the words. Thank you for defending me today, for treating me like I have actual value rather than just tolerating me because the ancestors said you had to bond with me. It means more than I can adequately express. Curathane looked at him with an expression that held genuine warmth beneath her usual confidence. You do have value, little one. Not as warrior by our traditional standards. You will never match our warriors in strength or conventional hunting prowess no matter how much you train. But you observe things we miss because your training taught you to notice details we consider irrelevant. You solve problems through methods we would not consider because your thinking patterns are different from ours. You ask questions that make me reconsider our traditions from new angles I had never examined. These are valuable qualities in mate, small human, perhaps more valuable than raw physical strength that many possess but few can apply with genuine intelligence. She moved closer, reaching out to touch his shoulder with the possessive gentleness that had become familiar over weeks of constant contact and daily teaching. I rejected 7 of our finest warriors over the past years because they viewed mate bonding as conquest rather than partnership. They saw me as prize to be won through displays of dominance, as trophy that would enhance their social status and prove their superiority. They did not see me as person with thoughts and preferences worth respecting. You do not try to dominate me. You do not assume superiority you clearly do not possess. You treat me as person with agency rather than prize to be claimed. You work diligently to build competence rather than faking confidence about abilities you lack. You speak honestly about your limitations rather than pretending strength that would fool no one. These qualities matter more than physical power. Her hand moved from his shoulder to touch his face with unexpected intimacy, a gesture that felt more personal than their usual training contact. I am beginning to understand why the ancestors chose you for me, Adrian of the humans. You are not what I would have chosen for myself if selection were left to my limited mortal judgment. I would have sought someone physically powerful, traditionally skilled, perfectly adapted to our culture's expectations. But perhaps that is exactly why the choice was necessary, because I would have chosen wrong if left to my own devices. You challenge me in ways I did not know I needed. You make me examine assumptions I had never questioned. You bring perspectives that strengthen my understanding rather than simply reinforcing what I already believe. This is what true partnership provides, and I suspect the ancestors understood that better than I did. Adrian's heart was beating faster for reasons that had nothing to do with physical exertion or training exercises. I'm still scared, he admitted, offering honesty that felt safer than pretending confidence he didn't feel. I don't understand all of your customs despite weeks of learning. I'm terrified of disappointing you or dishonoring your traditions through mistakes I don't yet know I'm making. I'm just a botanist who got catastrophically lost and stumbled into something way beyond my preparation or capabilities. I don't know how to be a proper mate by your standards or anyone's standards really. Curathane's expression softened into something gentle that contrasted beautifully with her usual fierce confidence and demanding teaching style. Fear is acceptable and even appropriate when facing unknown challenges. Little one. Courage is not absence of fear. It is taking action despite feeling afraid. You completed the trial despite being terrified. You face each day's training despite uncertainty about whether you can succeed. You speak honestly about your concerns rather than pretending false confidence that would fool no one. These are all forms of courage that matter more than the fearless bravado many warriors display. Fear that motivates careful learning is wisdom. Fearlessness that leads to careless mistakes is dangerous foolishness. She pulled him closer with careful control of her considerable strength, mindful as always of the size and power difference between them. I will continue teaching you our ways with patience and thoroughness. You will continue learning to be worthy mate not by becoming Varath. You will never be Varath, and that is acceptable, but by becoming best version of yourself, by bringing your unique strengths to our partnership rather than trying to imitate our warriors poorly. The ancestors chose well even if you do not yet fully understand their wisdom, but you are beginning to understand. I see it in how you move with more confidence, how you think about problems with increased skill, how you look at me when you believe I am not observing your expressions. How do I look at you? Adrian asked, his voice barely above a whisper, half afraid of the answer. Like you are beginning to care about me as person rather than just accepting circumstances fate has imposed, Curathane said simply, her own voice soft. Like the bond is becoming real to you emotionally rather than just obligation you must fulfill through ritual compliance. Like you are choosing to stay and learn and be mine, not because the ancestors commanded it or because you have no choice, but because you genuinely want it for reasons that have become personal to you. Your eyes reveal what your words do not yet say. She was right, and that realization was both terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Adrian was developing feelings that went far beyond dutiful acceptance of circumstances he couldn't control. He was starting to care about Curathane as a person, her intelligence, her unexpected humor, her protective fierceness, her patient teaching, her genuine interest in his perspectives. Feelings that were genuinely his own choice despite how this entire situation had started. I am starting to care, he admitted, the words feeling both vulnerable and necessary. About you specifically, not just about surviving this situation or fulfilling ritual obligations. That scares me more than the hunting training or the cultural learning or any of the practical challenges. Because caring means risk. It means vulnerability. It means accepting that this bond has somehow become real despite starting as a catastrophic accident I never wanted. Good, Curathane said, and she smiled with warmth that made Adrian's heart skip in ways that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Because I care too, little one. Not just because the ancestors chose you or because I have responsibility to teach my claimed mate, but because you have proven yourself worthy of genuine care through your efforts, your honesty, your persistence despite being completely out of your depth in situation you never sought. You are mine by ancestral choice and sacred ritual, but you are also becoming mine by my own choice, by my own growing feelings that have developed through watching you struggle and learn and refuse to surrender despite overwhelming challenges. The bond grows real through our daily choices to trust and value each other, not just through ritual or fate. This is as it should be. She kissed him then, fierce and possessive and unexpectedly tender simultaneously, the physical expression of feelings that had been building through weeks of constant contact, patient teaching, and growing trust that neither had expected but both had somehow developed. Adrian kissed her back, abandoning the last of his resistance to circumstances that had somehow transformed from catastrophe into genuine possibility for something real. Outside their dwelling, the village continued its evening routines under star-filled alien sky. Inside, two people who'd been brought together through cosmic accident and ancient ritual chose each other freely, building something real from circumstances neither had wanted but both were learning to value deeply. 2 months after the accidental trial that changed everything, Adrian had adapted to Varath village life in ways he wouldn't have believed possible during those first terrified days. The dawn training sessions that had seemed impossible now felt routine, his body having built strength and coordination through Curathane's patient but demanding instruction. He could move through basic hunting exercises without embarrassing himself completely. He could communicate in Varath without constant translator dependence, his linguistic skills having developed through daily immersion. He could navigate village social customs with reasonable competence, understanding the complex honor systems and relationship dynamics that governed Verath interactions. Most importantly, he'd learned that Curathane was far more than an impressive huntress who'd claimed him through ritual. She was thoughtful and curious, patient with his mistakes while demanding genuine effort toward improvement, protective without being controlling, fierce in public but capable of unexpected gentleness in private moments. She taught him not just hunting skills but the philosophy behind them, how Verath viewed partnership as coordination of complementary strengths rather than competition for dominance, how they built trust through shared challenges rather than just declarations of feeling, how they maintained bonds through daily choices to support each other rather than just through initial ritual commitment. The other villagers had gradually accepted his presence, moving from initial amusement at the unlikely mate claiming to genuine respect for his efforts to learn and adapt. Several warriors who'd been skeptical about whether a human could ever be worthy of bonding with their finest huntress now acknowledged that while he'd never matched their physical capabilities, his different perspectives and skills brought value to hunting parties and village discussions. The turning point came during a hunt that went badly wrong through no one's fault. They tracked prey into territory where a much larger and more dangerous predator was hunting, creating a situation where the Verath hunting party suddenly became potential prey themselves. The predatory creature was massive, aggressive, and far more dangerous than anything their group was equipped to handle safely. Retreat was the smart choice, but the terrain made retreat difficult without exposing vulnerable party members to attack. Adrian, operating on pure instinct and training that Curathane had drilled into him through months of patient teaching, did exactly what mates were supposed to do according to Verath tradition. He positioned himself to protect her back while she handled the primary threat. It wasn't impressive by Verath standards. His combat abilities were still minimal despite training. He was barely holding his own against smaller threats, while Curathane fought the main creature with skilled precision born of years of experience. But he maintained his position despite terror, trusted their coordinated training, and fulfilled his role as partner rather than liability. When the hunt ended, and the danger was resolved through Curathane's skill and the group's coordination, everyone emerged safely though exhausted. Curathane turned to Adrian with an expression he'd never seen before on her face. Not amusement at his limitations, not patient assessment of his progress, but genuine respect and something deeper that looked like actual love rather than just acceptance of ritual bonds. "You protected me," she said, and her tone held wonder that suggested this meant more than simple tactical coordination. "You are small and weak compared to our warriors by every physical measure. You could have fled to safety, and no one would have faulted you for choosing survival over partnership. But you stood your ground despite fear that I could smell on you. You trusted our training and our bond enough to believe we would fight better together than separately. You fulfilled mate bond duties that many of our own warriors struggle to honor when genuine danger arises." She pulled him close with a fierceness that had become familiar but now held different emotional weight, deeper significance that transcended simple possessive claiming. "The ancestors were absolutely right in their choice. You are worthy not because you are strong. You will never match our warriors in raw power no matter how much you train. But you are brave in ways that matter more than mere physical strength. You are intelligent enough to use your abilities effectively rather than attempting to imitate our strengths poorly. You are loyal to bonds you honor even when honoring them requires facing fears that terrify you. These qualities matter more than any amount of raw physical power could ever matter." Adrian, still shaking from adrenaline and the near-death experience they'd just survived, found himself responding with complete honesty. "I couldn't let anything happen to you. You're not just my teacher anymore or just the person the ancestors bound me to through ritual I didn't understand. You're..." He searched for words in Verath that adequately expressed feelings that felt enormous and complicated. "You're mine too. My mate by choice now, not just by ritual. My partner who I genuinely care about beyond any obligation. The person I've somehow come to love despite this entire situation starting as a catastrophic accident I never wanted." Curathane's smile was radiant, transforming her usually fierce expression into something soft and genuine that took Adrian's breath away more effectively than any amount of physical training ever had. "No accident, little one. Never accident. The ancestors knew what they were doing when they guided you to our ritual at precisely correct moment. I knew, even if I did not fully understand during those first days. And now you know as well. The bond is real, not just because sacred ritual says so, but because we have chosen to make it real through daily trust and growing love that neither of us expected, but both of us have come to value more than we can adequately express." She kissed him, fierce and possessive and tender all at once, the physical expression of months of building trust, patient teaching, growing respect, and deepening love that had transformed ritual obligation into genuine partnership. Adrian kissed her back with equal intensity, abandoning the last traces of resistance to circumstances that had somehow become the best thing that ever happened to him despite starting as the worst mistake he'd ever made. When they returned to the village after the hunt, something had fundamentally shifted between them. Adrian stopped thinking about this as a situation to escape or endure, and started thinking about it as a life he was genuinely building by choice. Curathane stopped treating him as primarily a student who needed teaching and started treating him as a true partner, whose different strengths complemented her own in ways that made them both more effective together than they'd ever been separately. Their bond, which had started as a misunderstanding enforced by tradition neither questioned, had become something real and chosen, not just through ritual or ancestral selection, but through daily choices to trust each other, to build genuine partnership, to care despite all the excellent reasons cross-species bonding should have been impossible. The story concludes several weeks later with Adrian and Curathane participating in the final bonding ceremony, the one that Verath tradition reserves for mate pairs who have proven their partnership through shared trials, demonstrated genuine love through daily choices, and built the kind of deep trust that allows true unity rather than just ritual compliance. The ceremony takes place at sunset before the entire tribe, with elders presiding over rituals that have guided Verath partnerships for millennia. The ceremonial space is decorated with hunting trophies, representing both partners' achievements, Curathane's impressive collection of successful hunts and Adrian's more modest, but genuinely earned contributions through tracking assistance and strategic observation. The elders observe with satisfaction that speaks to approval of how this unlikely pairing has developed, noting that the ancestors did indeed choose well even if the initial circumstances seemed catastrophic. As they stand together before the assembled tribe, hands clasped in the formal bonding position, Curathane speaks the traditional words with her voice carrying clearly across the ceremonial space. "This is my mate, chosen by the ancestors and claimed by my heart through months of building genuine partnership. We are bonded in strength that comes from complementary abilities rather than similar capabilities. We are bonded in trust that has been earned through shared trials and daily choices to support each other. We are bonded in love that grows from genuine respect and care rather than just ritual obligation. He is mine by ancestral selection and by my own free choice. I am his by the same dual bonds. This partnership will endure through all challenges because it is built on real foundation rather than just ceremonial duty." Adrian, who has learned enough Verath to speak without translation assistance and understands enough cultural context to mean every word, responds with equal formality and genuine emotion. "This is my mate, who taught me strength I did not know I possessed through patient instruction and demanding expectations, who protected me while teaching me to protect her in return, who claimed me with possessive pride when I was lost and confused, and who earned my love through demonstrating what true partnership means. She is mine by ancestral wisdom I did not initially trust but have come to respect. I am hers by free choice I make daily despite this bond starting as accident I never sought. Together, we are stronger than we could ever be separately. This partnership is real because we have chosen to make it real through trust, effort, and love that neither of us expected, but both of us have come to cherish more than we can adequately express. The gathered tribe erupts in celebration that speaks to their cultural love of stories, where unexpected circumstances develop into genuine love through shared trials and demonstrated commitment. The ceremony continues with traditional elements: shared meal, exchange of hunting tokens, formal recognition by elders. But the emotional core is the obvious genuine connection between partners who started as catastrophic mismatch and became something real through months of patient building. Later that evening, in the privacy of their dwelling that has truly become their shared home rather than just where Adrian was assigned to stay, Curathane pulls him close with the familiar possessive tenderness that has become her signature expression of affection. "You were lost in the jungle," she observes with warm amusement, looking for plants, stumbling into sacred rituals, completely unprepared for anything that followed. Most catastrophically lost anyone in our tribe's history. Epically lost, Adrian agrees, leaning into her embrace. Possibly setting records for bad navigation that will be discussed for generations. And somehow found exactly where you needed to be, Curathane finishes, her tone shifting to something more serious. The ancestors work in ways that appear mysterious to mortal understanding. Or perhaps fate is simply the word we use when circumstances align perfectly despite appearing catastrophic initially. You arrived at precisely correct moment, participated in trial that revealed your true qualities, and proved yourself worthy through methods no one expected, but everyone has come to respect. Or perhaps I'm just really bad at following directions and extraordinarily lucky in who claimed me when I messed up everything possible, Adrian suggests with self-deprecating humor. Perhaps both truths coexist, Curathane says with that familiar amused smile. You are still small and weak compared to our warriors by every physical measure, still occasionally clumsy during hunts when stress overwhelms your training, still learning our ways and probably will continue learning for years yet. But you are mine, little human. Mine by ancestral choice, mine by sacred ritual, and most importantly mine by my own free choice that I make daily, because you have proven yourself worthy of love I did not expect to feel. And I find I would not trade you for the strongest warrior in any tribe, because strength without your intelligence and loyalty and genuine caring would be empty achievement. Good, Adrian says, pulling her even closer despite the size difference that makes the geometry slightly awkward. Because you're mine too, my fierce huntress who claimed me with possessive pride when I was terrified and confused. My patient teacher who demanded my best efforts while respecting my limitations. My genuine partner who makes me want to be braver and more capable than I ever thought possible. I wouldn't trade you for anything either. You're the best catastrophic accident that ever happened to me. Outside their dwelling, the village continues celebrating the completed bonding ceremony under star-filled alien sky. Inside, two people who met through cosmic accident and ancient ritual celebrate the very real love they have built through months of daily choices to trust each other, to learn from each other, to build partnership that honors both their different strengths and their shared commitment to making ritual bonds become genuine love. Sometimes the best relationships start with complete catastrophes and misunderstandings, and become real through the deliberate choice to see value in what fate or spectacular navigation failure or ancestral wisdom has provided. Adrian had gone looking for rare plants and found something far more valuable, a mate who claimed him possessively and taught him that being chosen by forces you don't control can become choosing each other freely.
Bill China accesorios. Ah, cabrón.
Ana, si pones estos de plástico no tiene tipo ventosa.
Ay. Ah, pendejo. Allá enfrente, chat. Vengo por el artículo de Avelino.
Hola pendejos de mierda, soy el
¡Cállense!
anticristo 2009 y hoy les traigo...
Perdón, hermano. Cállate.
Solo